Well, everyone, welcome to the channel. I hope you're not looking for an ultra concise yet exhaustive how-to video on putting this lift kit on this truck. I'm going to do my best here, but we're going to get into some vloggy bits. We're going to get into some blather. I suggest you check out my entire channel if you've just come for the OBS Ford lift kit. I've got a bunch of other stuff if you're into it. Anyway, I'm going to just go with a 3-inch lift here. It is a Skyjacker Suspension Lift. This is a 2-wheel drive truck. I've always desired the 4-wheel drive ride height. I would have loved to have a 4-wheel drive truck, but this was around the corner and in every other way just exactly what I wanted and a great price. So it's been years in the making here. But I bit the bullet and picked up this kit. I got black Max shocks because I've always been the black cowboy. I'm also hoping that they're good sort of ride comfort considering this is a 3/4 ton pickup. But I think it has original equipment suspension on it all around, and so I thought to myself, you know, lifting a 4-wheel drive truck is one thing. Lifting a non-4-wheel drive truck is questionable at best, but it needs a suspension upgrade anyway, and rather than just wrenching all the live-long day to make the truck so stock, which is what the story with this truck has been kind of since the beginning, we're going to do an aftermarket upgrade instead. I got everything nice and wet, which is how you want it, lubricated up for the install. I had a friend who I was going to go over and work on this at their place, but then they started mouthing off about how they didn't really wanna and they were scared of the springs. So we're back at my house now, and I don't have anywhere to go with this stuff, but we've got new spring perch, I want to call those, or some kind of mounting that we're going to end up needing. This and that hardware kit in the back there. We got our Jesus Rocks sticker that I could live without right up front and center, loud and proud. That's okay. I didn't have another choice in suspension systems other than Skyjacker, so I will stomach their kind of preachy attitude there. There's the shocks, there's the mounts, there's the leaves for the rear, and of course the coils for the front, which is what we're going to get into kind of soon. What else have we picked up? I got some 6-ton Harbor Freight brand jack stands, new gen. They've got the safety pin that I'll just indicate there, that once they're up where you want them, you can't kick them right by accident and drop the whole shebang onto yourself. I don't have an ideal shop for this project, in case you haven't noticed. It's better than working outside, so I'll take what I can get. What else did I pick up? I've got... Where are they? Just laying in the bottom of the truck still? I made a Harbor Freight trip, and I suggest that you do too. I got 2 different kinds of spring compressor. Now, I owned a set of these, but I cut a rod way down for the mini truck because I put a suspension lift in that little truck, by the way. These are a great design, and I was happy using them for that application. But you get to a point there where you're asking an awful lot of those, and this is a bit more substantial. This is a clam style, and he will compress for you. Say you had your box in here so that you could see things right side up. Hang on. Then you could see, you know, that it's going to squeeze it that way and allow you to apply it. So I got both of them. He was 100, he was 35. We'll see about that. And a pitman arm removal tool, which I may have had one kicking around already, but I wanted to have that with me. So that's what we'll end up using here once we get the wheels and tires off the front. So that's step 1. I got them off the ground far. I got full suspension droop, so as high as I could get. I needed a hard surface so that the jack could migrate and roll to align itself as I lifted the front of this truck up. If you tried that here on the rubber, it would be bunching up the rubber and this whole truck would be pivoting, because that's the whole point of having wheels on your jack, and you have to have them, is that it's finding its logical location based on the way that it's loaded while you lift it up. So you got to have something. If you're on the dirt or whatever, it's one thing, but I'm preloaded here downhill, and so I didn't want anything rolling ahead. By the way, I got some chocks. Those blocks have 45-degree angles on them, and they're in front of the rear tires, so we're in pretty good shape here. I'm off the ground as much as I can while I've got full suspension droop, so then, like I say, let's buckle into that 7/8 impact socket and get the front wheels off this pig. Speaking of sockets real quick, I've got a selection of metric and SAE. Since this truck is a Ford, you'll find that you're going to end up reaching for both. which is a delight. Those are 1/2-inch drive for this big mammer jammer, which is awfully heavy, and the big wrench is a good size too. So if I could step down to my metric impact set that's 3/8 drive, I could have a more manageable ratchet wrench. I could have a stubby short wrench, which I'll likely not even pick up for this project. I've got the little 3/4 or 3/8 impact, excuse me, 3/8 impact, 1/2-inch impact. Nowadays you can have a smaller one. This is probably 1st gen. So it's a good 2/3, whoopsie. It's a good 2/3 as long as this one is, but she got it where it counts. Again, SAE wrenches and metric wrenches. I got the ratcheting ends that are also wobble. A lot of times that's preferable. Sometimes it's not. Therefore, you know, I got, this was a made in Japan Craftsman set. There it is. I'll prove it. That's a real nice set of Craftsman wrenches, but it wasn't complete, so I'm missing a few here, missing even more over there, and I've got some others hiding away if I need them. It's an ordinary set of 1/4 and 3/8 drive sockets for just such an occasion. A pipe wrench if stuff decides to get real bratty with me. I've got a 1/2-inch impact breaker, which is fairly serious business. And then I've got ye old thick-walled tubing chrome. I forget where I found this, but this is what I use as a cheater. And he'll fit over most of my ratchets. And in some cases, a few wrenches that it makes no sense to throw this much leverage on. See, we get about to there, and he don't fit no mo. Anyway, got to have yourself a cheater bar. But one of the other things you want to have when you're operating these is your absolute wits about you, because the power that you've got there, you can both damage something on the vehicle or you could damage your body like big time serious. So you want to watch out for that situation. I've also got my THC vape pen, which is going to come in really handy for not losing my ever-loving mind trying to accomplish this under these circumstances, and a selection of flashlights so that you can see what it is that you're doing. My headlamp, believe it or not, my Milwaukee headlamp is you know, a magnet as well. So once you're on, you know, you can choose to fucking stick that anywhere you damn well please. You put it back on your forehead, whatever you like. Got myself the old magnetic hunter seeker device for those things that you just can't get on your hands and knees and crawl around on the ground to get. Again, a variety of lights here. Gloves, BFH. I've got this, you know, dead blow. I've also got some serious steel hammers if the case, you know, if it calls for it. I've got brass and aluminum and a pry bar and some other stuff here. This could go back on the location where it belongs. Juices and sauces. We've got, you know, anti-seize somewhere. I've got blue thread lock. I don't think we're going to need any RTV on this one, but the anti-seize, I'll get that. And we'll definitely need some penetrating oil, so we've got a selection of, where's that? Here it is. This is for when we're putting things back together again, excuse me. A little WD for when we're looking to take them apart. I've also got some liquid wrench hiding somewhere. If you like Croil, but that can took a shit on me, and it's been a while since I've seen it on the shelf. So anyway, and carb cleaner, although most of the stuff that we're putting on is in really nice brand new shape. So yeah, this is a fundamentally simple thing. It's just going to be logistically complicated, because once you have suspension apart in the front, this thing isn't going to move until we put it back together again. So let's hope we got everything that we need. Now we can take those wheels off. Another thing that you want to have with you is what you need for a pitman arm. So you're going to coordinate your pitman arm, which is a replacement for your current pitman arm, which has to do with steering. It's a component by which your steering input can be translated to your control arms there, or excuse me, your tie rods. So, and directions for that. I've also got brake line extensions. I've got a pair for the front, stainless steel braided, and a pair for the back. They are both called, I think it's the same exact kit. Anyway, I called Skyjacker and I told them, you know, I want to have everything. I don't want to have to come back around and need anything. And so they helped me make sure that I had that stuff and this here. I will not be needing a steering stabilizer because I'm only doing a 3-inch lift. And again, that's going to get me up to the 4-wheel drive ride height. But you can't run 35s at that height. And really, when you start getting into trying to run 35-inch tires, that's when you start looking for a steering stabilizer and 4, 5, 6, and plus, lift kits, etc. Then you really need to help the steering not get away from you. In this application, we don't need it. I did root through the boxes quickly outside, but I failed to mention that I want to make sure I haven't got directions in here, because I confess the suspension lift I did on the mini truck here, I did it sort of halfway before I got the directions out and just checked to see that there weren't any, and there were step-by-step sort of, I got it done, but had I read the directions, I'd have been kind of in better shape. So I'm going to bring this paper stuff in, but I don't think there's any directions in here. This mostly looks like hey, there is. So we'll get those. Let's do that, and then we'll put this back, and we'll go have a look at them. Well, I'm glad I did that, since first things first, you want to park the vehicle on a level concrete or asphalt surface, and they want you to record any discrepancies that it currently has, because apparently we're going to use those to dial this thing in when we're all done. And so we're going to use a measure tape to measure the front and rear, both sides, from the ground up to the center of the fender opening above the axle, and record this information for future reference. So we'll put the wheel and tire back on. We'll remove or lower the jack stands. I'll try to take note of where I'm parked, and we'll get up and out of here after we move the mini truck, and we'll go and get that done, and then we'll come back. Alright, step one, measure up the front four corners. Driver's side, passenger side, front to front, 35 versus 34 and a quarter. So we got a 3/4 inch lower passenger front, and driver's side rear to passenger side rear is about a 1/2 inch difference, 36.5 to 37. I can't compare the front and the back because I feel that's a different situation potentially. Although they say lift is the amount of lift to the front of the vehicle, and then only lifting the rear to a position level with the front. So I suppose that means this measurement should be the same all the way around when we're done. Who knows? We'll find out. Then you get yourself a box hardware breakdown, which I'll probably get into that more to just double check lengths and threads and stuff that I'm using the right thing. Step one, block the rear tires, and I'm going to cross these off as we go. Block the rear tires, wheels of the vehicle, in front and behind the tires. Raise the front of the vehicle with a floor jack and support the frame with jack stands. Remove the front tires, wheels, and shock absorbers. So we've got front and rear of both back tires blocked and chalked. We're back on our jack stands, which are just behind the subframe rail that runs across right there. On this particular truck, I noticed further down in the instructions they're talking about the differential and letting go of the drive shaft, but I hope that we don't have to deal with, because of course we don't have a differential on a two-wheel drive truck. I left the jack just snug. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. If I had more jack stands, I'd have more jack stands under the truck. I've got some wimpy ones, and I'm told in the directions we're going to need to support the control arms or whatever they call Ford. This front end that Ford made is just about the stupidest thing in the world. Just about the stupidest thing in the absolute world. Anyway, we're going to have to get under that, though, and support it at some point. The last piece of step one is to let go of the shock absorbers, so I guess we'll get in there and unbuckle those bad boys. I had planned to do one side of this and then the other, trying to carry forward what I learned on one side to the other side, which is oftentimes handy, and you certainly can't work on both at the same time. But it does discuss making sure to do some things on the passenger side first before the driver, and vice versa. So we will do exactly as the directions say, right on down through the directions from one end to the other, and hopefully that allows us to have an extreme amount of success here. So like I say, next step is let go of the shock absorber, both front, left and right. All right, real quick, I learned here, this is M18. 3/4 is a loose fit, but that's an M18, and so is the nut on the other side of it. Fairly straightforward there. The nut wanted to come off, then you got to crawl underneath and sort of pound that bolt out of there using a punch, which I've got one here somewhere. Anyway, I also decided to just use some cribbing blocks under the front two corners. This way I can get extremely rough with this and never worry that anything's going to fall on my head. I did want to scoot, I had these kind of square in here, but I scooted the top two on either corner out and away because I see the directions say you want to take that bracket that has the roll bar attached to the frame that gets dropped. You must, I guess, leave the roll bar attached to the hub on both ends And if we just drop it from the frame, well then we can get all the play out of the suspension on the front without having to disconnect any of the link or any of that, which probably ends up being more of a pain in the ass. So it's a good piece of advice. Here's where I'm rubbing on my tires all the time on my lower control arm. I don't think that geometry is going to change. The body's independent there, so I think I'm going to have the same rubbing problem that I've always had. Unfortunately, oh, and it rubs on the sway bar too at full lock. There's a chance after an alignment. I'm not really sure. Next time I buy tires, I'll buy slightly narrower tires. I've got an oil leak happening that I don't want anybody to mention as if I haven't noticed it, but that's not part of this video. Then you've got to stop this upper portion of the strut from spinning. That's 18 again, so this is the wrench from the back of doing that. And then I got the wrench on that portion of the strut. There's too much bolt sticking up to get a short socket over there and to get onto that hex portion, which is what I had set up here. What you've actually got to do, because that's a 15 mil, is back that 15 millimeter nut up high enough so then you can get a shallow socket. It has to be a shallow socket because there's absolutely no room against the fender liner to get a tall socket on, which is normally what you do when there's more stud like that. So I've already tried to get this up and around. I have the benefit of a wobble or whatever flex head ratchet, which you would need as well to do this. Otherwise you're stuck to the two wrenches. So anyway, it's a 15 mil wrench to get the nut to a certain point, and then a floppy 15 shallow socket the rest of the way. In fact, once I got that on there, I twisted that right off on my other strut. This went about so far and then it just ripped right off. So this is what we were working on. Rather than spinning up, I put, penetrating oil on, but what's left there for threads were so covered with rust scale that, like I say, I'm pleased to be replacing those anyway. So back to work. All right, I'm pleased to be replacing these. The top twisted off of both of them, and the bushing is completely shot here. I'm certain these were close to being at their end. All right, that makes step number 1. Separate the drag link assembly from the OEM pitman arm. So that's the business end of the pitman arm. If your vehicle is equipped with a front anti-sway, and remove the brackets that hold the anti-sway bar to the anti. Everybody calls it something different. We call it the sway bar where I'm from. Where's our little pitman arm diagreasy? Oh, it came with the pitman arm. So we're looking for one or the other. This is probably my truck. This is probably jumping around the transfer case or vice versa. Let's get under there and take a look. Get that part done. Okay, that's another M15, 2 nuts holding that sway bar bracket, 2 nuts holding this sway bar bracket. And then they want us to let go of the drag link from the pitman arm. So here's your steering gearbox covered in fluid. And here's your OEM pitman arm. And so we got to take there's a castle nut on here. This little pin goes through it to keep it from coming off. And you just all of a sudden not having any steering control, number 1. And number 2, there's nothing to say or nothing keeping you going straight either. Your wheels are free to go in any direction. So anyway, if you can't figure that out, you should probably not be working on putting a lift kit on your truck. I'm disturbed by the amount of fluid leaks down here to some degree. However, I don't think I did the power steering pump on this truck. I think it might have been the other truck, because I was about to say I thought I had replaced that already. Anyway, it doesn't hurt to have some oil on stuff to keep it from corroding, but you've also got to keep certain fluids where they belong so that components work correctly. So we'll straighten that little munged up clip. We'll slide him out of there. We'll get the right sized socket. We'll spin that bolt off of there, or that nut off of that bolt. I don't know how we're supposed to hold it. It is greasable. So I don't know. Let's just see what happens here. Okay. These are 21 millimeter nuts. So they're all castle nuts. I took this one, I put back on there, but I'm not sure. The rest of them I just held on to. all four. I got that one just chilling in case I need a little articulation there. This one's gone off the pitman arm. And then on the ball joints, out at the hub, same thing. Pulled the pin. And out here I could get the impact wrench on and just zip 21 millimeter nut off of there and off on the other side. Over here. A little penetrating weld doesn't hurt anything. Now these need to be pulled apart. And I did not buy the ball joint puller kit from Harbor Freight. I think I have, this is not what I want. I think I have a ball joint puller here. Or pitman arm, yeah, I've munged that up. Now this is going to be along the lines of the one that I just bought. It's in the truck. Both of which I believe are labeled. No, it says tie rod and pitman arm puller. Yeah, it's the same exact one. Anyway, smooth moving machine threads. Slim enough to fit into cramped areas. Well, we'll try the one that I've already made a mess out of first. And there are certainly different physical sized ones. It ought to work to some degree here. Although we kind of want to pull... I'm not exactly sure what we want to pull here. So I'll get back to you. Okay, I got the other side, but I'm going to try and show you this one. What we've done here is install the puller thus. And so it's, just not on top of the rubber boot, but the two tangs here are underneath this steel component. And then the threaded rod that's a component of the lower portion, we're just going to crank on this until it pushes it down and through here and out. And it's going to probably go relatively explosively. No need to put the impact wrench on this. So this has just got a square drive hole on the end of it. You can also put a socket over the hex portion, but just give it a little bit of the business here, which is also steering us. At some point, something's gonna let go. There it goes. And that's it. So like I say, no need to put the impact on it. It's sort of like, now we've got no steering control, right? So at this point, I can set that up at the pitman arm and yank that down. The geometry at the pitman arm, given the central axis of this, and the central axis of that, and the vertical axis of those other components, trying to get that to come down and out of there with these two ends connected, I was thinking you're just asking too much of a three-dimensional puzzle. So we'll just drop the ends of it. Everything's staying the same length. It'll be ready for an alignment when we're all done with this project. And if I don't like those, I'll buy some new ones or upgrade them. But for now, they're just going to need to get out of my way. So let me get that puller set up there and yank that whole system down. And then we'll be to the end of step 2, because we've separated the drag link assembly from the OEM pitman arm at that point. And it is equipped with an anti-sway bar, so we'll remove the brackets. Then I can put an X through that. Then we'll be done with number 2. Alright, you want to be careful now, see, because this is my pitman arm, and here's that drag link. And I'm using that puller and pushing on the end of that threaded stud. But if it walks on this, what I've done is I've pushed a trough that's constantly, I've monkeyed up the end of that stud, so it's constantly walking this off to the side. So I think my only options are to put a fresh end on that stud. I had considered cutting it flush with the pitman arm, just because I'll still be able to push on this point in the center. I may do that. I'm hesitant to cut more away because you can't put it back. I'm inclined to, cut less off and then cut more later if I need it. So to start with, let's put a fresh end on that and see if we can align everything perfectly to where we can push straight down and get it to come out of there. Now, admittedly, I got a late start yesterday, but this is day 2. I left off and left the pitman arm puller under intense pressure against the pitman arm, or the steering gearbox, and douched it up with sauce, WD-40, penetrating oil overnight. And I don't want to lose track of what's what here, but I ended up just dropping this whole thing rather than trying to take the other end of the pitman arm apart underneath the truck. You know, because that wasn't happening. That's the one I cut flush, and I still can't push it out for some reason. And so we'll see just exactly what becomes of this whole scenario. Anyway, I don't want to like get it flipped around and have a real hard time. I also don't want it to be in my way with the grease. That's, you know, as you sort of, So the orientation there is relatively particular instead of just whipping it. At this point, I'm going to turn the music down and wonder how much grease is on my glove and therefore now on my phone. So, what did it require? Well, in the end, I jumped on YouTube and grabbed another tutorial for removing pitman arms. I regret that I can't. If you want to punch in on that process, that was from Sweet Project Cars. How to remove a bad pitman arm fast, and it falls right off. It didn't fall, but it came off easily. You just slice it. I used my grinder. It's here somewhere. Here it is. I used the grinder because it was already set up from cutting off the bolt that didn't, or the end of the ball joint that didn't want to press out. But I notched the shit out of the pitman arm while it was on the car, and then I fired up my air hammer. This is Ingersoll Rand. It's a nice one. You can't really have something just like this in a battery tool, although I've toyed with the idea. Anyway, it'd be like you'd want the M12 SDS Max hammer drill probably, and you'd want an SDS Plus, and you'd want an SDS Plus chisel. Anyway, I've got an air version, and you just put it in that slice and just brrr. I also had the pitman arm puller on there, and ultimately it started to let go, and it almost fell right off. So we are able to scratch off number 2, separate the drag link from the OEM pitman arm. Well, we haven't actually separated that, so we're going to play a little jazz here. If your vehicle is equipped with anti-sway bar, drop the brackets that hold the frame. Now, mark the front drive shaft. This is all for four-wheel drive. Connect both front brake lines disconnect them at the calipers. And save the crush washers, but we're going to not reuse OEM lines. We've got Skyjacker brake lines that come presumably with a crush washer. Oh, there it is. So, hang the open ends of the brake lines as high as possible to keep the fluid from draining out. Cover the open ends to prevent loose dirt from entering the brake system. And then disconnect the vent hose from the front differential, which again we haven't got. And then we're going to do 5 through 7 on the passenger side and then on the driver's side. So let's get that much done. Okay, now you haven't got any steering connected, so you can swing the hub over to suit yourself where you can work on it. This is your brake line extension. It comes from the hard line over its flexible section. It comes from the hard line. This will be what we're replacing because, of course, when we go up here, this becomes tight more quickly. It actually comes tight already, pretty tight. This might have been pointed upward instead of forward here. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, the little banjo, the bolt itself has got a hole drilled through the side of it and then downward. So, or there's a groove around it and then a hole downward. Anyway, through the bolt is where the fluid flows. But there was dirt all around here, this fitting. And so I want to get a good bite on this guy, because first I thought he was a 15 mil, but he's a 14. And then, if you take the socket off, sometimes you can have more luck. Or sometimes on the gun, you can get it walked down there enough, but we want to make sure we're coming backwards. And then it immediately starts leaking. And they wanted you to save these crush washers, and you kind of need a second hand here. And now the socket's on it. Anyway, to start with, I set it right up on top of here. It's going to leak. So I set it right up there. That'll stay for a second. I put the bolt out of it back in the hole. I'll show you on the other side. Slid the bolt back in where the crush washers land. The original ones, doesn't matter if you got new ones. I put the bolt back in there, and then I wrapped that up like a finger got cut off in a kind of a good shop towel, and then I went around it with tape. Electrical. We'll do that to this other side before it, because your master cylinder is higher than this no matter where you go with it. I thought for a second to uncap the master cylinder, but all that's going to do is allow air to full atmospheric pressure to push fluid out here. Right now we're kind of working against that by leaving the cap on the master cylinder, so I suggest you do that. I'll get this guy bandaged up, and then we can cross off step, because I have a 2-wheel drive truck. We did 3, just isn't NA, not applicable, and then we'll cross off 4, and then we've got some serious mechanical stuff to do on the front 2 sides. Okay, so they want you to get underneath the axle beams, and we're doing this on the passenger side first and then the driver. But the other end of this axle beam looks just like this. It's got a pin through it, and so it can only tip down. It can't just go everywhere the way the directions kind of imply, unless I'm missing something. So I just parked the jack underneath the high point there and clocked it so that the handle's still coming out through the the tire well, fender. What is this called? Wheel well. Anyway, then I can take the hub over and out of my way. Now to get in here with the 1 1/8" tool that you need to go on the nut there, you can't put an 1 1/8" socket through the spring and get it in there at all. So you're going to want the open end of a wrench, since the box won't even jump up and around. But if you start here, then you can go all the way around to there, and you can slowly walk him off. I put some penetrating oil on, and once he's off of there, the dished washer that sits down in the spring right here will come out as well. And then you're just going to pop this, which looks to be another bad case of potentially this size. No, smaller than that, maybe 14 mil. What are we working with here? I like to start pulling things out of what we've used already on a project, because oftentimes it's about, it's nope, 14's too large. I can't believe it'd be 13 or 9/16. I'm not sure. We're gonna do this one live. I'll write it and tell you what it is. 13 mil will do that one for you. An 1 1/8" wrench down here. Okay, we removed the spring's lower retaining nut and washer. That's 1 1/8" wrench, like I say. 13 millimeter socket to get the little clip that holds the coil to the top. And then we need to remove the center pivot bolt from the end of the axle beams, both of them. They're 21 millimeter socket necessary for that, to get the nut off. And then I tapped the bolt through, and once it was sticking out, I could get under the head of it with a pry bar and push it the rest of the way out on both cases. And then the radius arm towards the rear of the vehicle, so that basically there's nothing left. The whole hub, radius arm, and axle are loose from the truck, and that's an 1 1/8" wrench to get the radius arm on the the passenger side. Okay, so I have the 1 1/8" wrench. Because of the angle of the threaded end of the control arm or radius arm, let me turn my headlamp on. Because of the upward angle here, you can't get a socket on there. If you can get a short socket on there, you can't get the ratchet wrench into the back of it, and you certainly can't get a long socket on it. So over here, you're stuck with the wrench, and it was just a matter of lying here and yanking on it, or going over there and kicking it to break this thing free. And I used a bunch of penetrating oil and got that nut to come off of there. And like I say, the ends of the axle, the ones right here, it's just take the nut off of it and then knock it through. I like to use a brass or an aluminum hammer to knock a bolt like that through. Here they are here. So that when I'm beating on the end of it, you can see the pieces of brass there. I'm not munging up that starter thread. So I'll tap things like that with a brass hammer, or you've seen the aluminum one is around here somewhere. But anyway, on the driver's side, you can get a short socket on my truck and a dry socket wrench or driver on there. I couldn't do anything here until I put the breaker bar on, and so that sticks out here, and I can step and continue to put some English on that a few times until that guy's loose enough, and I'll get some more penetrating oil on him to where I can set up with something that ratchets, because of course this doesn't ratchet. Finished taking him out of there. On this side of the truck, I left the coil spring in, even though, because I can't easily get to that nut. Believe it or not, the lower coil of the spring holds my wrench angle up. Annoyingly, I took the hook and stud out here. So when that lets go or is loose and I can get out from underneath it with the jack, which is up right now, then I think this will come down, and I can have more options as far as getting a hold of that nut, as well as rocking this around and see if there isn't any way to loosen it up enough there, because like I say, I just can't get the wrench in. But one thing first and then the other, and then we'll be back to the next step. Alright, they want us to move the power steering cooler line, which I'll do. I'm going to hold off on it though for a moment. The brackets that hold the pivot ends of the front axle beams to the front cross member are bolted to the frame. Some are riveted. These stock brackets must be removed from the cross member by unbolting or drilling out the rivet heads. You may need a right angle drill, and you're going to center punch the rivet head, then drill a 1/4 inch hole about a 1/4 inch deep, and then drill it off using a 7/16 size drill bit. Don't drill into the frame, and then drive the rivet out with a hammer and a punch. Well, if you come over here to the passenger side to start with, at least on my truck, this bracket that they're talking about had 4 bolts, and it's the nuts that you're going to take off. They are 21 millimeter, but the heads of at least these 2 bolts, now when you are looking for this thing, obviously it was right in front of us a moment ago, but the 2 bolts that are, they call this a cross member, it is enormously wide, it goes underneath the oil pan, but the 2 bolts there, you've got to reach up and around on top, slide a wrench in there, and that's going to be, I want to say, here it is, 15 millimeter for the heads of those. And then, I'm sorry, this is in the wrong orientation. They come through from the back. And so you got a 21 millimeter socket on the nut that you can see right there at the hole. And then you reach up and over in there and put a 15 millimeter wrench on the head of the bolt. And you run those 2 out. These 2 that the 2 that were facing me, when I crawl under here and look, right here, 1, 2, those are the 21 millimeter socket again. Now here's that transmission cooler line, and they want us to take out that little bolt right there, and that one there, and move him out of the way, which I'm not sure. We got to re-drill holes in this thing or something, I'm not sure. But now the pivot end on the other side was over here, and these are rivets. So this is where we're gonna center drill. We're gonna center punch those, drill it with a cobalt steel drill bit while the hot flakes rain down on my face, and then drill that with a 7/16 up into those 2, and it looks like a fair few more right there, 3 more. And this is where they think you're going to want that right angle drill, because we got this other flange of the subframe here. You're not going to be able to, where do we got to be? Up there. You're not going to be able to set up a drill bit without banging into the subframe here. So we're going to get a right angle drill around, I guess, from the job site. I'll get the whole hog, and we'll pick up some other stuff. I've got cutting fluid. All of that's going to be raining down on my face. I am going to use my cobalt steel bits. I'm going to remember to turn my headlamp off when I'm not using it so the battery goes all day. But I've got a Drill America drill cooler, bit cooler, which is a, like, machinist index. There are a lot of, well, I shouldn't say that. Probably not 30 of an inch, but maybe every 1/16 of an inch. Anyway, you want a cobalt steel bit to get seriously, you get serious when you're going to drill into steel. Tool steel bits and stuff. Or a carbide drill bits, which I have got those at the job site. So maybe I'll grab the, I don't know if they're carbide or cobalt. I'll grab a selection of other bits in case I have an issue with one. I'll get the right angle drill, and then I'll come back here and get back to work. LOL, JK. I just set up my chisel tip in my air hammer. It's got a kind of an arch in the center that kind of keeps it on. But I power chiseled off the head of all these rivets, and so now I think all I'm needing to do is set up the punch tip for that bad boy. Ooh, which is just going to be this one has seen better days. I might try this here or this one. That's going to have a hard time. You kind of want to point So try and start that in the center of those and push them back out from whence they came, in which case the bracket ought to fall down. I beat it a little bit with a hammer and put that big mother effing pry bar in against the subframe rail to try to just pop it, but I'm sure those rivets have swelled right along the shaft diameter, so you really need to dry them out of that hole. It's not as though just the head of it is keeping it from falling out. The shaft diameter embiggens when the rivet itself is formed, and so it's an extremely tight fastener. It's a really good fastener in many ways. However, not when you have to work against the ground like this. I really need a car lift someday, and once I have a car lift, I can think about all the projects I've already done that it would have been nice to have it, and hopefully by then not hopefully, but probably by then I won't need it as much. But I grew up with a car lift is the thing, so it makes me well aware of how much handier it would be to do a project like this. All right, back to work. All right, that was a toughie. I got her. You can see that I got the rest of the rivets to push out, but other than that, the bracket came down. You want to be careful not to lose the location of the rivets, which I kind of did. Was in there this way. I ended up getting behind it, which is why this flange, this front, flange here was more at a 90 degrees, like at the bottom. Opening it up, I was slicing in behind, trying to cut those free, because once you cut the head of it off, if you can't find the center and drive it straight through, which I wasn't having a lot of luck with, so you can bounce all around as well, which I was trying not to do, but it happens anyway. So I got this down and out of my way. I'll get the rest of those rivets down and out of the way, and then I think we're at removing the brackets that held the radius arms to the frame. Rivets have to be drilled out to be removed. So more of this in a little while. Okay, I had to throw that piece of LVL on the floor over here and over there so that the jack would roll. I debated that Badlands 3-ton jack that's got nice big wheels on it, because it would be handier for me without a concrete or a smooth flat surface to roll it around and do the things that a jack needs to do, because these holes in the floor make it really difficult for the caster wheels that are on the back of the jack to move. So I need to install a flat, smooth thing underneath this and lift it enough to align the threaded end of the radius arm in its hole enough to then pull and be able to roll on the jack with this weight and pull that out of the radius arm brackets at the back. Now there's a bolt in the one on the other side and then rivets underneath there, and I think that's a bolt on the other side. Whoops, no, there's a bolt there. So those 3 rivets and that bolt, nut, and on the other side, we gotta get these down and off the frame. Yeah, rivet, and then bolt at the back. So we'll go back to what we were doing before. There's more room to work, being toward outboard on the machine. Slide that stuff around and lay something down, and we'll get the power hammer going and chisel those sorry guys, it's taking the piss out of me. We'll chisel off those they're not bearings. They're rivets, and we'll back out the nuts and bolts, and we'll take those brackets off. All right, I dropped the brackets for the radius arms, both sides. Brought them back around here. That is a what is it? 18 millimeter nut that you can run with the impact, and then around on the back side is a 15 millimeter head to those bolts to hold them still. And then you've got OE equipment, bracketry for the axles and the radius arms removed from the vehicle, so you can cross up to number 10. I still haven't done the cooler lines, but that's to there. I believe now, yeah, install the new radius arm drop bracket. We are on to putting new stuff on this truck. So it's, I don't know, 5:30. Yeah, 5:30. I've looked up the radius arm. I've looked up ball joints, and adjustment, and what do you call that? The radius arm bushing, and the front axle bushings, all from Moog, or what have you, high end, whatever, premium, nice stuff. This is such a war to do work with these parts. I've also left bolts where they came from for right now in parts. If I could, I think you get all new equipment, but these are flange head nuts and bolts and stuff, so they're not something I'm about to throw away probably. Here's the state of my radius arm bushings. It looks like an aftermarket one on the driver's side. Those are the cup washers. That's a cutting disc. I don't know if it's really worth keeping. These washers are for the springs, coil springs. These washers are for the radius arm. But these bushings, like I say, I guess it's not. What does that say on it? Does it say Ford? Yeah, it does say Ford. So there's one of these for each side, and this has got like a steel cover over that. I must have lost the other steel cover. Anyway, I'm not content to put those back in for the money. I'll throw new ones in. We're going to get an alignment and stuff here anyway, and this will mean between the new shocks and springs, bushings, essentially after we get it again aligned, new ball joints and new pitman arm. I don't know what those two ball joints are. They are just, I don't know if you get those with that whole component, the rest of it, basically new tie rods, and you get new ball joints on the other ends of them for the drag link and the pitman arm. I don't know. I have to look that up. We'll see whether that makes sense to do. At this point, we're going to break out new parts and try to get them oriented. They want us to locate the rearward hole on the bottom of the frame, and then raise the brackets up and throw a 5/16 by 1.5 bolt through that hole. And they want you to look at this picture to do it. That looks like the front. Oh, here they are. Yeah. So you use that. So we're going to move from there, and it's going to drop it 3 inches down, essentially, most likely, to get us that 3-inch lift. So let's go get the parts bolted up onto the frame and see what it looks like. All right, what was I getting at when I was talking about what time of the day it is? Because, of course, I was started yesterday and worked into today so far. I've probably got 8 hours now in this project. Mostly wrenching on it and working right on it with my hands. I included running out to get things maybe once or twice. I've been out more than that, but as far as being completely set up to do this, how long you're going to spend, I could see spending 2 full days here. We've just begun, putting new parts on, and so, like I say, I would have liked to have been closer to 5 or 6 hours stripping everything off the front, because it's far more complicated on the front than the rear is going to be, knock on wood. But we're up to this point. We've got the rear 7/16 by 1.5 inch long bolt. Those are all going to be SAE, so it's a 5/8 head and a 5/8 nylock nut on the other side of it. They want them all put in, bolt head out, bolt head out, bolt head out, bolt head out, but then bolt head on the inside with the nut and the washer outside on this one. But at this point it's snug, and I'll use these holes on it to drill. And then they make mention in the directions, but I'll show you here on my truck. If you got the same truck, you've got a series of things routed here. We've got, sorry with the headlight, but I moved this little plastic clip. He holds a line. Sorry, I haven't got what I need down here. Sorry. Here we go. Let's try a different. There we go. This line is held in a plastic clip. I just pulled him out of the way, pulled him out of the clip. So now I can drill this hole with confidence and the hole on the other side with confidence. And then we've got some other stuff going up here, electrical and everything. I just got it pulled away, and we're not going to go gangbusters here when we're drilling. We're just going to go through and call it a day. But you want to have your hand back there initially just to see what it is that you're trying to miss. And in here, I don't know how the hell I'm going to drill that. This is just, that's the parking brake. This is fender liner. But that may actually create, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do there. That's going to be wild trying to drill that one at the back. So let's get started here and see how this goes. Okay, it's 6:30 and I'm at a point here where, let's see, I can't turn my headlight on anymore. It needs to be plugged in. Well, I'm basically avoiding the other hole that I can drill. I put that OEM, or that bolt in that OEM hole. I drilled and put this bolt in. I could drill upward again over here and before I go in tonight, there it is, and put that bolt in. Now these two over here, and this is the thing, if you haven't got a hole hog, a right angle drill, whether it plugs in or it's a battery, serious at right angle drill, you're gonna have a heck of a time here. It's possible with an ordinary drill gun, I suppose. So a full-blown, full-size, good manufacturer. And again, the bit is where the rubber meets the road. In this case, you want one of those. I'm probably going to end up ordering a stubby Cobalt 7/16 drill bit, because if I were to have the overall length of this bit, I could get started in here essentially without doing anything differently in the truck. So that's what I'll probably do. And I suppose if I drill straight up on this hole before I go inside, that's the only one that I've got to do like that. The rest of them are pushed, from the side. 1, 2 on this side, 1, 2 on the other. And that would allow us to cross off number 12, which is to tighten all the bolts down, holding those brackets. Then we could cross him off. Then we've got to get the new axle beam pivot. Now those two radius arm pivot brackets are castings. These axle pivot arms are fabricated. 2 pieces. These 2 planes folded and the other 2 planes folded and then welded through there and welded all the way along this outside here somewhere. Oh, I guess, yeah, 3 sides. 1, 2, no, 1, 2. Yeah, anyway, fabricated from bent plate. So just as a point of interest, these go underneath the springs when they go in, and then we'll have the front sort of put back together again, except for the steering, which I've got to be sure of the parts that I'm ordering and then wait until they show up. So I'm not going to be back to this I'll be back to this right along until I'm waiting for those. Hopefully I can get that stuff ordered, and by the time it gets here, I'm sort of ready for it. I suppose I can't work on the rear end because I can't pull out, turn around, and back in without steering. So there's a chance, if the weather's going to be all right, that I'm working on the rear end while it sticks out of the building, just to keep moving and get that thing done while I wait for steering components. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm going to try to get set up. The whole thing about this drilling is you got to put so much force behind that drill to drill on steel, and even if you had a mag drill, you can't get into those places where I need the stubby drill bit. However, a magnetically attaching mini drill press, which is what I'm talking about, would make a hell of a device to try and get a few of these drilled, basically. But I've had to lie on my back and get my knees and stuff up behind that drill to be able to push, because if you're straining your lower back or anything, I mean, this isn't for somebody who's got, I'm almost 40 here, it's a few more years, but I'm feeling this. And I'm on the rubber, which is nice. A few occasions where I've had to crawl around on wood or something else like that, you immediately notice it. So one of the nice things about concrete, or one of the cons to working on concrete, where I've wished I had a nice smooth concrete floor most of this time, is crawling all around on it is just terrible. So this has been softer than that. But again, we've had all the problems that you have when you don't have a nice smooth and flat floor. If I had a smooth flat floor, I'd have a car lift, and I could work kind of right in front of me for the most part. Even with drilling, it can be handier. You can roll in a stand, and if I had that set up, I'd have a stands, various basically jack stands and stuff that come way up right in your face that move up and hold things, which you could cradle the drill in it and push off it, whatever. So this working close to the ground thing is a pain, in case you didn't know. But you want to be real careful when you're pushing on that drill, because you don't realize that you're straining weird muscles and stuff, and then you go and sit down later and you're like, you wake up in the morning and you can't move for days. So let's hope that doesn't happen to me. I'll get that last vertical up and down hole drilled on the other side and bolt that up, and then we'll come back and see what other tools and sort of peripheral things I ended up buying, both for the steering and for the drilling ops, and we'll get this thing, you know, we'll keep moving. All right, I wanted to just prove that I definitely put that one in there before I went in for the night. The other thing, I mean, I hate nuts and bolts. I super hate nuts and bolts. I really struggle to do mechanical work. I've gotten better and better over the years, and I really didn't notice it during this project and stuff. But earlier in my tenure of mechanical service, because, so the other end of this, the nuts and washers, and the head over here, at 90 degrees from one another, I can't throw the box end of this wrench over to hold the head of that bolt and then tighten this nut up, or this bolt and stuff, if I were to loosen that. I can't even get this bolt over and down in this hole with this nut and bolt assembled, because the end of this is in the way of that. So I had to back this all off and loosen it and remove it, throw that bolt in so it poked out, and then I was about to put the box end of a wrench on the head of it, because that's a handier thing to do up and around out of sight here, and then run this up with the impact wrench. But I knew that if I did that, I'd have to take it back off, and then I could hold this and run that down tight. But then I get on here with a socket, and a shallow socket, can't finish tightening this up because the studded end of this coming out pushes you back down and off, and you need a deeper socket, and I don't have a deep socket for my 3/8 impact driver, which is handy. So I had to jump into the 1/2-inch impact, which is unhandy. And so you got to have all these different things, and that's not even an impact socket being chrome. It should be black. Now I've got my Shockwave impact sockets coming, but I mean, I own, you know, 1/2-inch drive impact sockets in metric and SAE, 3/8 drive impact sockets, 3/8 drive chrome sockets. I have this 3/8 and 1/4-inch drive pack out set. I've got a full set of traveling ratchet wobble head wrenches. I've got, like I said, this set of wrenches in here. I've got a full set of wrenches in the shop in a drawer, and I'm just going to prove it here real quick. So the thing about nuts and bolts is you end up having to have all of this massive inventory, so mechanics and stuff know my pain. It's, you know, I've got all these and those massive sizes and stuff, and then there's miscellaneous stuff laying around. You got to have crow's feet, and you have to have hex sockets, and you have to have you know, all this stuff. I'm just ranting now at this point. Those are the boxes, and then you gotta have these things to do, what are those? Oh, those are 12, then you got the idea of 12-point versus 6-point sockets. You can't get things clocked in the right way. And I have hexagonal, like giant Allen sizes that are impact drive for a socket driver. And what was the other thing I've got? Oh, these, move this stuff. They're like sockets for when things are stripped. Here they are. What do they call these? I mean, it's just Harbor Freight brand, because I don't use them all that much. But they call those bolt extractors. So they tip around where you've stripped the head of something hexagonal drive, and then they cam in and like bite. And you can theoretically, and they worked the one time I needed them. And then you get all this organizational accoutrement, and like, everybody always wants to know if I own stock in Milwaukee or something, but it's like, you know what? It's such a godsend to have standardized stuff. Now, people think, you know, where's the pack out for the wrenches? Rolling these up, I could put those 2 or even these 3 rolls into the next size thicker pack out, 1, 2, 3, far more effectively than I can lay them all out in it beautifully as far as wrenches in a pack out. So that's where these rolls are headed, or into a deeper pack out at some point. And of course the impact Shockwave sockets I bought come in a pack out, because it starts to become a question of like, form factor is everything. And I come and go to the job site and stuff like that, so I have to have things that I can leave with, and then I have to try to be able to reach and get stuff when I'm at home, even if there's a job site going, because back and forth to the job site, I even did that this weekend. I've got this miscellaneous stuff that I inherited. I just gets out of control, nuts and bolts. So anyway, I got that done. I just wanted to prove it. So now we're down to specialty drilling, and then we can pivot to the axle pivots, no pun intended. But let's pack this in for tonight. Let's call that 10 hours to this point, with some faffing around and some running out to get stuff that we didn't have, and the hardship of not being able to lift the truck up and down, the hardship of not being able to roll around on the floor. So if you had everything that you needed and you really had an excellent shop for doing a project, this would be the end of your first easy, day, 6-8 hour day, and you'd be a little bit farther even than this. But it's still another full day and a beautiful setup shop to get done, and I've probably got another 2 full days of running back and forth and faffing around and getting some stuff done and then running back out again. We'll see. All right, we're back. I got this short cobalt steel drill bit with TIN coating, which is the gold color. That's a McMaster number 2416A37, and he was how much? Yeah, $30 and then shipping, so I don't know. Anyway, you can't cut an ordinary drill shorter because you can't cut the business end off, and if you cut too much shank, which would be necessary, you can't really grab the fluted part with the jaws, the chuck jaws. So there you go. Okay. I'm gonna chuck that up. I'm gonna finish doing some drilling here, and we're back on holding the bracket against the frame. Drill the 4 remaining holes through the frame. Check the inside of the frame so we're not drilling and stuff. Use a wire brush to remove any undercoat. Bracket installed on a clean surface. We've snugged it up with the couple nuts and bolts that are in it so that the holes that we're drilling are in the right locations. We may have to, I suppose, at that point, since we drilled the holes based on that tight attachment location, we don't have to worry about loosening it and getting everything in loose and tightening everything together, which is pretty common with nuts and bolts. So we're going to insert 3 bolts, this and that, and we'll end up crossing that off. Then we're on to the next thing. I also took delivery of my energy suspension superior components that deliver improved handling, increased durability, restored performance, and better than new. These are the axle pivot. It says here somewhere. Oh, it was the sticker. There it is. Axle pivot bushings. Very complicated, many pieces. Not sure if they're all going to be necessary. I have to imagine that they are. That's for the front, and those go in these brackets. These are my radius arm bushings, and they go in the brackets that we're putting up on the truck already, and they replace these. So at some point here, this becomes this, and then that part sits into the back of it. There must be another component that's still on the truck, or that I threw out. I don't see it. Oh yeah, maybe I do. I'm not sure. You never know what might be on that still. We'll see. I don't think. Maybe. Anyway, back to work. There you go. You can see I needed to make some room here in the wheel well, so for the wheel well liner. That's much sharper than the drill bit I was using. I can't imagine I used that size so much out of this bit cooler kit. I've used several drills in here, quite a bit, maybe half a dozen. You can, I guess, see the different colors. Obviously, I've used the one in question already now, so it's hard to tell where it started. I would have assumed it would cut just as well as the one I just got from McMaster, but I can tell you the McMaster one is brand spanking new, and the sharpness of that is unbelievable. So, if I were you, given the effort I put into drilling with the other bit so far on this project, I'd get probably 2 of those and just use, you know, brand new bits right from the beginning. And I would just, if I'm buying new ones, I'd get shorties because they'll do almost everything you're trying to do. The regular length is just impractical for a lot of things. You can always bring up the table on your drill press. So anyway, that went really smooth. Over here we got an issue though. The park and brake cable is basically right where we got to be here. It's almost exactly at the same elevation of this hole. You got to drill back here, so you're just not coming through there until it's out of the way, and that means it can't stay in this grommet situation. Even being free from there out, it's going to be hard to deflect it down. Maybe you could, I don't know, maybe I'll mess with the liner. If I can get the liner out of the way and come through with the longer bit, which is of course dull, it would go over. I'd have to be, we'll see what I do over here. And I can't reach in, like clock the drill up and get in there because it's wider than this. So that cable's got to be moved over here. We'll see. All right, I've been looking around and I looked at the original equipment. So that's what I had lying on the counter there, and this is what you get for new urethane bushings. And I'm looking at this here. This is everything. I've got this slit on here. This would have been on here, and that would have gone up to the original side of the bracket, and then from the other side of the bracket there's another half of, well, I guess it might have gone like this, but there was this urethane or this nylon spacer thing, and I think maybe that went on there like that, kind of. And the directions for these from who? From Energy Suspension. It's like not one size. There's one side of directions fits multiple set numbers, but they all call out reusing number 3, which is the OE nylon spacer. 3 not used, excuse me. So that's basically what we're going to do. This diagram, for somebody like me, if you got 3 different setups, then you need 3 different diagrams, and then you could spring for the second half of the paste of the sheet of paper. You know, it's like, what are we saving here besides adding confusion? So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to replace this thing. I'm going to leave this cup washer that's steel and perfectly functional. Replace that. Then we're going to put that up into there. And then we're going to put the rest of this on here, which, as you can see, which was my test, this stacks up just about right to get a nut started on, pull it down almost the full thickness of a nut. And I think that's a castle nut that gets a pin. Anyway, this is obviously the stack up, and the only stack up that we can have. Oh, and these sit really nice into there at about the halfway point, right? So that's what we're going to do. And then when my truck comes apart and you read about me in the paper, that's what happened. Sorry, everybody. I think that's right, though. All right, well, I ran a plumber's wire brush through that nut because it didn't seem to want to get started that easily. I also traded for the other one. There's a chance that this should be exactly the same, but sometimes if it came off of that threaded, bolt end, then it should go back on. That's your best bet. So I swapped them and I ran one of these around inside of it. So anyway, he went on there finally. I did it with the nut first, no washer, just to get started and pull everything together into a tighter sandwich. And then I had room to slip that OG washer behind there again. And I put some torque on it, but those are going to be stiffer than whatever was in there. And we still got some alignment and stuff to do with the axle. So that's next. Let me go in there, and I maybe was better off, although there's no way I'm dragging this whole assembly and it's attached because of the sway bar. So I was about to say maybe it was better trying to remove those bushings and replace them before that's been bushed together, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm just working on this side because, like I said, the other side I got to move the parking brake to drill. So for now, let me just try to get the axle bushing replaced. Oh, and I've got to put the new bracket up too, so I got to put that up, bolt it, do some drilling. I better go back to following the directions. All right, I went and got the Maddox, which is just the Harbor Freight, I want to say ball joint press kit. What does they call it here? Ball joint service kit. There you go. Most of this stuff is just, as long as it's relatively decent steel or forged where it needs to be, like in the case of this here, works just fine. And for like $75 or $85. This is the setup that I'm using for this truck. I took their medium collar here. There's small and large there. This fits right in between. That fits over the shouldered end or the front of the bushing that you're trying to remove. I've gotten a ways into this, but it fits over that, right? And then you can put the concentric thing that fits, has a little shoulder for the female end of the C-clamp portion of this, right? And that'll sit into there. And then this other one has some concentric stuff, but it's got a flat landing inside that'll sit onto the male end of the press. And this other side, this disc here, that'll actually fit down into there. So I was about here when I got started, and I just went until I had sit this all the way in with the impact wrench, with everything, and then I had like this shoulder here, right? Then there's nothing else in the kit, and the expansion kit I did buy, but there's nothing in that. I'm gonna take it back. That'll help you here. I just stacked up a few washers. One's big enough around, but I wanted some layers thicker than that, just for, it may become annoying, and I may just get, because that's the one thing about this, you'll see. I'll stack these up in here, and then I'll leave this thing out, and we'll just put that right onto the washers and see if we can push everything out straight inside of this collar that we're pushing on the end of it, with this thing here. So I'll buckle you into the tripod here and see if we can get that much done. Okay, I have established that I believe this is the arrangement that we're going to use, the only arrangement that calls for the replacement steel collar. I did mic up this, they say in the rest of them that you're going to keep this thing here, but I've munged this up, beating it out of there. The rubber is well bonded to some areas of it. See where it's rusty, it wasn't bonded, that's where it let go, but the other areas it's well bonded to. And I don't know what kind of compression forces they're going to be, but I wouldn't be surprised if, like I say, this is, I think, 1.755 or so, right at the sort of midsection there. And this is, the new one, is 1.785. So 657585 is, 30 thousandths of an inch overall. I think we can get that. And of course all this stuff stacks up. So they want everything greased. I'm going to set this here. I'm going to show you all how to do what I'm doing here. If it turns out to be what you need to do for the truck, well, that's great. If not, I'm going to have this sort of half installed and have to rip it back out and have kind of wrecked stuff. So I don't know. I'm going to use their grease. I've already put like a bead around there where it's lead in. This little stack up is, I don't know, one way or another. I guess this points, I really don't think that has a direction. But there's the shoulder, the black piece in the middle, and this little, this outer shoulder and this little inner shoulder here. That sits down into where this has been rolled over and would stop this diameter. So this is how we're going to push stuff in. And I'm going to allow the parts, these plastic parts, to take the grease with them while they go. And so then I'm going to put some grease there, push this guy in. I'm going to have to keep going here a little bit. There. And we'll let what's left for grease kind of do that and take that stuff in there. Looks like everything's going to stand up a little bit. Oop, no, it comes down and stops. Ah, I see. Okay. And so this is just as it's shown in the document. This will go apparently opposite. Oh, I know what. The casting is only about so wide, and so this must sit around that. I'm not really sure. It doesn't have a large amount of anything to do with these things, although it's shown there. So anyway, I'll put a little bit of grease around there and use it to push this guy in. I think that's kind of the assembly that we need to have. And then that has to get pushed into, and it won't hurt to have some grease on this, I don't think. That's going to have to get pushed into that axle. And we'll go back over here and look. So I'm thinking this has got to go back in there just like that and be pushed in, I think. So we'll set up our clamp that we use to take everything apart and use it to push this back together again, I suppose. Or try to, or like I say, wreck everything. This thing sits on this end real nice. And maybe that doesn't have to go all like this, just such a big deal. Not sure. Turn it the other way around this time, perhaps. And try that. See if we can make anything happen initially. Ooh boy. Seems like there's potential. There's also potential for the grease to get basically a bunch of dirt stuck on it, or grit, and make it very difficult. I'm gonna put my hand there and try to support everything for a second while I thread it together tightly enough to squeeze. I think that's kind of what you want to see there. That seems like it has some potential to do something of value. I'm not sure. And then we'll put the impact wrench on the other end of it and see what we get, I guess. Barfed the plastic out, and we've cut the ridge off of that. Or we barfed the little tube out. Interesting, interesting. Perhaps we should drive the sleeve in, then load it with these pieces? I'm unsure. But at this time, I can say that I can't keep pushing the steel much further or it'll back up into something else there. So what I can do is use that same medium sleeve here with this here, and then put this on there, I think, and then go back with this on the other end. I think like that. Kind of like that. Sort of like that. I need it over here more, so I've got a block underneath the axle to hold it up. We'll try to drive that sleeve in or break something here. Maybe I can buy a new axle shaft before we're done. Okay. That appears to be similar to what we kind of almost want. And you can put this back in this side, kind of. And this could go in there, basically, maybe. In, like, another universe, it could fit in there. And maybe that could, too, but it doesn't. It certainly squeezed that plastic quite a bit. So then the question becomes... Yeah, you shouldn't push on that. But can you push this into there in some way? You'd have to take this out, and you'd use this and this, and you'd put that there and center it to the best of your ability, and you'd take the impact wrench off for a moment, and you'd put this up here like that. Oh boy. There we go. Kind of like that. Kind of do something like that. Realistically, I'm just turning that by hand, but it's going somewhere at this time. Something's happening. Oh, we've pushed that right out through the back, apparently. It's got to all go in there. It's got to go in there. It's got to go in there, and we've got to press on it without sloughing the edge over, which that ought to do. It oughtn't done the damage it did before. Boy, is this difficult. If I had a friend in the world who could help me briefly, but it's not the life we live here at TMFX. That's got to go in there, see? So why don't you just do it? And can we get the last piece in without... Oh, come on, baby. Oh, geez. Why is it always a question of maxing out something's capability to make something happen? I think I'm going to need another set of hands. Oh, that is what cut this before. somehow. Now, there won't be another way to do this, so I don't think we're going to be able to reuse that, unfortunately. We'll see. All right, well, you probably can't see, but I went ahead and installed the other pivot bracket on the other side because I have been very frustrated by the, what was I looking for? The grease, I guess? By the bushing assembly that I did before. Oh, the tripod, so I can set up the phone and show you. I think I need to put the bushing together differently because what ended up happening, I'll show you. If you push that steel sleeve, on my truck at least, all the way in to the axle, what you end up with, if you push it in all the way up to here, it keeps barfing out the shouldered bushing. It keeps puking this back out again, and you can't get it up into the bracket because it keeps wanting to puke that out. But if you look closely, it's actually larger to this point. And if you slide this, now I don't know, I was going to put the taper toward this, but if you slide that on, that plastic stops that from being installed any farther. And again, I don't see the benefit to that shape, although I don't see it's hurting anything. But really, I think that this needs to go like that, and then we'll juice these all up like so, right? And we'll let the camera angle tip over and be dog shit. It'll be awesome. So I think if we put these all together like this on this side and it works out, that will be what we have to do on the other side. So this doesn't have to obviously stay on here, but the little downside shoulder, he goes in there first, and then the plastic spacer thing in the middle. And you could rejuice that up, I suppose, if you're running into problems sliding it all in. Just put a little more lube. That's what I say. Push that in. You can put a little more lube. Things start to catch. And you can push this in. And I think that's the ticket. Because that then pushes down. Now you want to be careful when you're using that press to press things in. You can't be pushing on the back of the rubber, or you're pushing it out of the steel. You can't be pushing on the steel. You need to be pushing, or on this side and holding this out without anything that's going to run into. So there's some caps and stuff available with that kit for that pusher that are too shallow, and then you can't shut everything all the way because in fact you're touching the cap on the other side that you're pressing things together. So you need a deeper cap so that you can do a complete job of pressing things together. And then we'll juice this up as well. And we're pushing the steel, Now that also kicks that out because it's making the diameter go up. I'm not exactly sure how to push this all together. I might have to crush that all together into one unit with the press. I think that's what I did before. But then it was installing beyond here, installing up onto there, that crushed this down, that kept puking this component out. So let me do all of this together, put this together with the press, then we'll put this on to stop us installing any farther, and then I think we'll have the assembly that we should have here. Alrighty. That's the ticket, I think. The stack up as discussed before. I put this hub back on now, the passenger side. Radius arm has got the nut and the washer on it loose, and I've got the kind of the bolt for the pivot between the radius arm and the axle is the bottom on the bottom here, sits it in the dish of the jack kind of nicely, and then I went up here until the end of the axle shaft is sitting close to where it could be slid in and then pinned. And I got a C-clamp holding the bushings and stuff, even though it went in a lot better when I put the ring on it, as I discussed right here. So when you, this is the radius arm pushing for the other side. Where's the rest of it? Anyway, when you, so I mung this all up. It's all slid to the side and kind of monkeyed up here. So I'm going to have to get another kit. The kit's, and this here tore, like we looked at before. The kit's like $27 and it's one day or whatever from Amazon. So today's Saturday though, so it'll be here Monday. But what you want to do here is stack these up like we discussed. Push them in until they stop here with this part sticking out. And then this goes on the outside. And that's all the farther that you install it into the axle, right? But things have to be nice and square and coaxial and all of that. Now it's not happening. So we'll get a new kit, and we'll take advantage of the fact that we'll have one of these, and one of these is now monkeyed up, and we'll have some extras or whatever. Who cares? It's not a lot of money. Of all the things to mess up. So I'm not that upset about it. Now we go and we get a light, and we go back underneath here. I've also got the pitman arm slid on up here. Okay, now we've departed the directions because the directions are at this point a little different depending on what truck you've got, and I've got some things like waiting on that bushing set that I can't, you know, force right now. So I would like to see if this end of the axle will go up into this new mount bracket. So I take that off that I had holding things together, and I suppose I'll just go over there and, oh no, I can push it up here. All right, maybe we'll just go up a little bit more until we get what we want there. Alrighty, then all we gotta do is see if we can't make things line up. I got a big punch, and I've got the ability to roll that jack away from me, which it looks like I need a little bit of distance. Oh no, just the jack wants to roll. Interesting. Now we're gonna have to make this line up a little bit better here, see? Center hole's there, gotta go to there. Not sure at this time what to do. Let's go see what we can figure out. Not gonna be able to get that without help, I think. Okay, well, kicking things off, I got this M18 mag drill on eBay for the cheapest I've ever seen one listed, with a battery, 5 amp hour battery, and the listing said tested. And so the motor does work and the lights work, but the ways, I mean, I couldn't even move it up and down. I got it freed up now. I got to get that, because you can stick the handle on either side of it. I got to get that pulled out. But for now, I mean, this, I don't know what they were drilling, but this has got like seriously three-dimensional crud in the back of this. And this is the way, or the dovetail system, that the drill moves up and down on when you turn this. And so this is all got to be cleaned. These have got to be cleaned and then honed in a sense, and I just polish things up here and then lubricated correctly and put back together again, all before I can give it a shot drilling our radiators. Oh, and here's the rack gear that walks it up and down. That's all munged up and stuff too. So I got to get a little further taken apart here, try to get this drive out of here, and then we're just down to this bare casting. Clean that whole thing up and clean these up and clean this up here on the head. And then, like I say, put it back together again with some lube and we'll see what we got. Lovely. Alright, well, I just got these Harbor Freight jaw horses because I couldn't argue with 75 bucks each on clearance. So like for both of them, it was far less than just one of them used to be. And they were already cheaper than the jaw horse, which I think most of the same tooling or whatever. Another case of where Harbor Freight, I really doubt I need the jaw horse brand. Not to mention jaw horse is yellow, and we obviously don't roll like that very often around here. So, the point is, don't look at that. Now, it works perfectly. First project, rebuilding or cleaning up anyway, this M18 mag drill. You can't set this thing so that this area is upright because it's got the big knob that throws the magnet on and off. So anyway, pleased with this. It's got a hold of this relatively heavy unit, you know, I have confidence that it's not going to drop it. And it's got some really nice non-marring jaws. If I was in a vise, I'd be up in my own face a bit, which is harder to really get in there and work, but also I'd be marring this up or whatever. I mean, you could make something like this work, but I'm happy with the jaw horse from Harbor Freight. Mobile work stand, whatever. It's not a... Anyway, I got everything scrubbed down. It did get scratched up some because I got in there with the wire brush eventually after I got irritated with the toothbrush. I don't know what this thing was cutting before, but basically none of these areas require any lubricant. I noticed that this way has little indents from the set screws that are on that side only. See, they're not over here at all. And so this is the one that didn't have any of those marks. And then when they face one another appropriately, then they're in this orientation. So I'm confident of their position here. And then we got this other half of the way that has that rack gear on it. Sorry. I'm gonna turn this down a touch. Didn't realize it'd be such a banger track when I tried to talk. Now, obviously this rack gear is applied to this area because you can kind of see the witness. Okay, so we know that's a unit. And this is just a little bit of how to remember how to put things together again when you don't actually make a good record of it. Well, in that case, then we are in there with the gear facing that gear. So then the question becomes, is it when, you know, is it this way? Because at this point, the gear comes to an end. At the end of the rack gear comes to the end of the circular gear that you're spinning with the handle when these are basically flush. The other way around would have you coming to the end of the gear and it going well beyond the other end of the ways. So I expect this is the way in which it has to be put together. Sorry about this angle. So I haven't got enough hands, but I'll do that. And then we'll be back up and running here, I hope. Alright, Don came over and we used a hydraulic jack, not for the power, but just for the precision. We just needed to move that up and down a little bit, and he was out here coming and going with this, sitting on the jack until I could put the existing pivot bolt, which you can see right there, through the passenger side axle shaft. And actually, I took the nut and washer off of there, but I'll throw those back on. I just got a little water here in the floor, so I'm not going to do it as we speak, but I'll throw that back on so I don't, for whatever reason, get that falling out. Then you want to put, I just have this in here to make sure. Then you want to put, I'm told, or I read, this washer, the nut that holds it down. And then for F250 models only, you get these, and they must just index over that nut once it's been tight and create a better scenario, I guess, for the bottom of their coil spring, whatever, for whatever reason. I'm not sure, but where does it say that? Optional frame support, floor jack, position the axle beams to the new drop bracket, check again the radius arm bushings and hardware, reinstall the front drive shaft, which I don't have. Then we're down to 22 with the floor jack still supporting the axle beam. Place the new coil on the spring seat. I'm sorry, so up here it is. No, it's right here a second ago. Anyway, I'm having a hell of a time making videos today. This is complicated to follow. Here it is. Note: F250 models only. Each new coil spring install one of the under each new coil spring, when really it's on top of what you just put together. The spring's lower retaining washer and nut. You put a hex cut coil spring spacer over the OEM hex nut stud before installing the retaining washer and nut. Install the spring's lower retaining washer and nut. Before you install the retaining washer and nut, you put one of the hex cut coil spring spacers over the OEM hex nut stud before installing the retaining washer and nut. So that's some piss poor technical writing. I mean, I can follow it in the strictest sense, but it just isn't the way that you put that together. Really, a drawing is worth 1,000 words. So there's a nut down here that stays. First you place that for F250. Then you put this. No, then you put the spring. Then this is inside the spring. That's why it's dished. Right? And it pulls down in the center. It creates a situation where you can't remove the spring over it. And then with the spring in there, you put the nut in there. So let's get that part put together. There you go. You want this kind of loose and sloppy. And then use the jack to place this upper end. And I still couldn't get the hole in this clip to line up. You may want to try the other one of the two in case it just has a little better fitment. But really this is a whole new part. So I ended up with a punch going through the hole in the hook, into the hole into the perch, and just pulled it until it appeared as though the screw could get started in that thread, which it did finally, and now we're clipped in. Put the nut and washer back on the end of the radius arm bushing, and then I threw, so I used extensions. I think it's a 10-inch and a 6-inch extension and a deep socket. I think this is 1 1/8 inch. No, this is the other size. This is yeah, 1 1/8 inch for that nut. And so, like I say, when the top's loose, you can reach down through everything, and that'll get you to where even the impact wrench fit on the end of that up in here. And I ran the nut most of the way down because they give you so much extra thread for safety, most likely. I ran it all the way down until the threaded end started pushing up the socket to where I couldn't turn the nut anymore, and that was about the right looseness to get the top held up. And then you can reach in there with a wrench and go until you got what you want on it for what seems to you like a good torque. Since I don't have a torque wrench, it's actually a wrench. I just have a torque socket wrench. I may try to, the thing is it's longer than a deep socket, so you basically just have to put a bunch of ass on it out here at the end of a 16-inch long wrench roughly, and hope you got what you need. So there we are. Now I'm going to pull out the shock absorber and throw that in position, and then I got to extend the brake line back to this. And then we're kind of ready to do this much on the other side before we get the steering back together to keep this from doing anything like that. And then we got the sway bar to throw up, or vice versa. Sway bar first, maybe then the steering, but pressing on. Well, it's been a couple weeks. I forget where I left off, but I had to get another energy suspension performance urethane bushing kit. The other one that I ordered as a replacement for the one that I wrecked didn't have these steel. That's what I ruined. Smeared it over by trying to jam it in all the way up, jam it into the casting all the way up flush with this collar, when really it should sit back. And that's what they give you, this ring basically to stop you sort of at that point. So new kit, it was 25 bucks or whatever, but it took a few days to get it, and then last weekend it wasn't quite here yet, and so then it came this week, but then it's this weekend before I get back here, so the truck's down an extra couple weeks now as a result. We got the brake lines connected. That's fairly straightforward. You just take them apart and reconnect them. I will say that the kits that you get are important. There's an FBL91 and an FBL90. You're going to need them both. One of them came with a T because the master cylinder comes down to this fitting. Let me get a light here. OE style, the way that this is plumbed. Here it is. The way the brakes are plumbed, it comes to the driver's side. See if I can see that. See the brass T? That's the master cylinder coming, or the slave cylinder coming from the, master cylinder coming in here for the right. To the left, it comes out to this wheel, and then it goes right. So when you take this driver's side apart, you got to take the OET out of there. You got your OET. I don't know if I set it aside here or what I did with it. I should have. That's my way. If I'm to trust myself. Either that or I threw it in the scrap bin already, which I must have done. Anyway, so you want the two different brake line kits, so you end up with a replacement T. We got that in here. We came over here and we got the brake line down here. I'm going to probably end up using their included red zip ties to just zip it over to the spring somewhere to hold it away from being rubbed by the wheel. And the banjo bolt and stuff is snugged up for right now. Don came and helped me get that axle pivot up there. So now we just got to get the other bushing in to there, and then I get Don's help again to line me up. I'm going to be in the upper of the two bolt holes because the lower I think is a different amount of lift. Same part. So I'm going to the upper one like I went over there to the upper hole. So let's get the bushing stacked up in there and pressed in, and then see if I can't get some help to line the bolts up. All right, something I noticed here, I've got the other side together, and Don helped me get that pivot in, but I just glanced at when you do the sway bar, and that comes after putting in the springs according to the directions, but obviously this cast end sits. I went back and looked at my footage. It sits over this. It's weirdly not drilled on center. This is some real farm implement type stuff. The underside of this, I don't know if it's easy enough to see or not, but it's like hollow. So it just sits over that. That's got a hex, because they want this thing in here basically for just F250 models only. It doesn't really fit, like that hex isn't relevant. This has to be here first anyway. And so if you go and look at the directions here, it says floor jack still supporting axle beam, lower the beam down enough to place a new coil into the spring seat, install the spring's lower retaining washer and nut, then the J-clip to hold the spring in the coil tower. For F250 models only, under each new coil spring, install one of the hex cut coil spring spacers over the OEM hex nut stud before installing the retaining washer and nut. Which, I don't know if, like, the sway bar may be optional, but it's like that's kind of like they want that. Then the spring, then the cup washer that sits down and holds onto the coil. Maybe because their coil doesn't sit around this cast nipple thing. So I'm just going to do what they say to do. It's just so weird that that's a hex hole instead of just a circular hole. It's the appropriate size for this. I really don't get that unless they use this part for multiple things. I wish they would just say. And anyway, after this, in the directions, which is where we were here, then it's appropriate length brake lines, and then it's reinstall anti-sway bar. But they must have been discussing like leaving this part of it and taking one of the ends of the end link out to disconnect it. And this would have stayed there. So this is the way I did it because it just came right off real easy like that once I took this coil springs, the old coil springs out. So I'm going to throw this together like this and make sure it makes sense. And then do the other side like that, and we'll be back on track, pretty much down to turning this thing around. Yeah, I didn't finish drilling these couple holes yet. The parking brake line's in my way there, and I can do that anytime. I got to get this thing up and rolling, make sure everything else is good. and then I'll be inspired to finish up by tackling that specialty drilling thing or taking apart that parking brake. Right now I just can't be bothered. I got to keep moving overall. Okay, well, I just stacked that back up as described, except I didn't add those hex discs. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. This cast part has sort of a nipple that the spring sits around, and then that dishwasher goes on top of that, and otherwise this is just swimming around on top of that nipple, doesn't have anywhere to land. I think this spring needs registration on the bottom, so I don't know what this special note about adding these is for F250 specifically, maybe without sway bars or something. Anyway, then I went and got the strut, the shock absorber, and I left the rubber bushing in my spring perch because it goes through. They give you one in 2 halves that's polyurethane. I'll hang on to that in case I have a problem, but I wasn't just going to destroy that one. Seems like soft enough, no problem there. So then I just got to get the other strut around, and you need the bolts that are OEM on the. You need these lower bolts. So, and they're in good enough shape for me. So I'll get that one. That is where is it here? B8554 are the fronts, and that makes B8558 the rears, which have a hole in both, and the fronts have, you know, unlike in the image, a hole on one end, a yoke, and then the stud on the other end, which goes straight up into the spring perch. So I'm gonna get that guy in on this side. He just sets in there. You can just kind of stretch him down. I came to the limit without being able to line these holes up, so I lifted the hub with the jack, etc., until you can line stuff up. But they're not that tough to stretch out. Get them all bolted up, then we'll come back and check it. There's a rubber bushing that comes for in this yoke end, and it's got a bit of a shoulder, and that sort of keeps it centered in there, so it goes bloop and then stays in there. I've been using the grease that came with the other bushings for my radial arms to just grease this metal stuff up a little bit. I push the sleeve inside, then I put this here, and I put this in the vise inside, and I just use the vise to until it pops in there, and then I pop it out of the vise and make sure it's centered. That works out real well. Well, for the most part, this is all put back together again. I'm fairly pleased with it being back together again. I'm not that pleased with how much work it is to do this project. I can't imagine trying to do this outside or in a weekend or something. I'm not new to this whole game. I've never put a lift kit on before, but I've done some wrenching in my life. But it's mostly just the places that you've got to be physically with your body, the places you need to lift. I mean, I went out and got bigger jack stands. I've got this cribbing, so I feel better about working underneath this thing. I got things like a pickaxe that we've used here to pull the hub in and inboard and outboard relative to stuff using the pickaxe. I have this big steel bar that we've levered on some stuff here a little bit. I've got multiple 20-ton bottle jacks, which obviously I don't need 20-ton. You could have 12s and stuff, but I've got multiple bottle jacks, obviously. Sockets, wrenches, pivot head, ratchet wrenches. Same with all my ratcheting wrenches, pivot as well, which has been super important. The 3/8 ratchet, just a bunch of stuff that, like, honestly, having some shop put this on for you on a lift, there's a lot of benefits to that. So anyway, I'm certain of things on this that I guess I could be certain of if I had paid someone else to do. So there's some benefit to putting your hands right on stuff and getting it the way that you want. But anyway, it'll be a lot of money saved, but boy, has it been a lot of time. And we're still working on the front here. So at this point, I got to put the steering back tomorrow morning, fresh. I'm not going to rebuild the ball joints. I'm going to wait until somebody tells me when they're trying to do an alignment on this that, your ball joints are bad or that these things can't, be turned for adjustment, and then, you know, I can buy a whole new setup, and I can pull it back off of the pitman arm that's on there. That's the thing, though. Shit, I got to get this off that old pitman arm, so I got to monkey with that tomorrow. That's going to probably take most of my day and keep me from just turning this thing back around again and working in the rear end of her. So anyway, let's hope that doesn't happen, but we'll have to just see. All right, catch you later. Okie dokie. Better part of $500 later. I had misordered. I used Napa, and it was unclear in the pricing that there were differences in fitment still. So I ended up moving up in pricing to get something of better quality, and I think I went up to something too beefy, basically. So we got it figured out here. There's the original. Here's the new hotness. All of these Zerk fittings, castle nuts, and pins come separately in little baggies. So you want to make sure when you get this stuff that you locate all of that, and it doesn't get lost in the shuffle here. But I put a castle nut on all 2, 3, 4 points here. We've got adjusting sleeves. And then this has got, like, on my OEM drag link, that was, maybe it was welded or something. No, it looks like it's pinned with a nut, but this one's welded. And so putting it in the same position, I guess that's about right. Yeah, why won't it sit in that position the way the other one does, though? Maybe, oh, because my ball joint isn't collapsed a mundo there. Okay, so a similar situation would be like that. In terms of rotation, which has got that and that. This is, you know, the axes of this is what I cut down, and this is one and the same as this whole drag link to here. Then you got 2 different adjustment sleeves, this one and that one, which are different because you can see the diameter of the threaded shaft is different. Heavier on the drag link, which is longer, slightly smaller overall on this other tie rod. Tie rod end's different than that tie rod end. One of them is left-handed thread. Regardless, I am going to straight up, and you have to put in your Zerk fittings, and you need a 9/32 socket, which you probably never use for anything else. You probably maybe find a metric one, maybe M8. Anyway, to get the Zerk fittings installed tight. Now, my center point of the ball joint is going to be hard to get. It's longer. It's going to be easier to get a measurement from the Zerk fitting. I flip this thing over, get a straight up measurement, Zerk fitting to Zerk fitting, Zerk fitting to Zerk fitting on the old one, and thread this whole thing up until that's basically the same. And I'll do the same thing here. Zerk fitting center to Zerk fitting center, compared to the, you know, see, this is my issue here. This can be manipulated around. So that kind of stays on the center line real close here. So we'll get that center. We'll copy it over here by threading that bad boy in there. Then we'll lock these down. We'll get it to lie here on the bench in a very similar orientation. Even though it's been moved around, it certainly isn't turning there or turning there. These are just moving a little bit. And so we'll be real close to what came off the truck. And then we'll try like hell to make it fit back on the truck. And just snug things up and pin them to get out, turned around, back in, and start work on the lift for the rear end of this pickup. Which not only do we have to get this installed, I've got to build up blocking so that the floor jack just fits in under the lift point that I might choose to use, which I don't recall which one I like. Anyway, so that the total stroke of my floor jack is enough to lift this high enough now that it's 3 feet or 3 inches hanging down to get the wheels and tires onto her. Because right now, you're going to have to come up like a foot to get those wheels and tires under there. And that's where we got to get that. So enough blather. Let's see if we can make this stuff happen. That was fairly straightforward, no pun intended. I did straighten the hub visually, kind of using the lines on the floor almost. And I've got a fairly straight hub over here. You know, good enough to know that we're super almost completely back where we were at, well enough to get out of here, turn around, come back in and start working on the back. That castle nut just needs to be pinned with a, with that cotter pin and bent so it can't walk off of there. I don't think we're going to put a lot of torque on these because the more that you squeeze the ball joint and the rubber boot, the more monkeyed up it can get. These locking collars on that adjusting sleeve have all got the nuts on them. I'm not going to drive to the alignment like that because it would maybe jostle and I could lose parts and stuff. However, I'm not necessarily going to button those up just yet. I'm excited to pick up the front and put wheels and tires back on, if only to turn around and back in here and see what kind of a project the rear end of this thing's going to be. There's going to be things that need to be snugged up, and I haven't got that bracket drilled or anything on the front driver's side. We're still missing those bolts. So let's just get some blocks under the floor jack, pick it up high enough to put the wheels and tires on, and get a sense of how much of a gasser with the front end pointed in the air this thing has become, and then sneak out, turn around, and back in. Well, we're halfway there. I like it better already, but now I wanted to make sure I had brake pedal, which I got right at the bottom. I've got a little bit of brakes, which this is downhill, so I wanted to make sure I had something before. I'm going to put some blocks on the floor too, just in case of emergencies. But let's get it back down in there and get set up underneath it with the jack, get the rear end up, and get the wheels and tires off. And I think we got to let go of the shackles then, and the U-bolts, and just take all that stuff off the rear axle. This stuff's hanging out back here ready to go, so I guess it's time. I'm gonna make sure I got brakes again as I creep around, and then just check on the way down. Hopefully we stop. I'll probably back right up on this stuff and then get out and look and see. I don't think my diff's gonna clear that. Well, we'll just see, right? Well, I got those nice jack stands, but this is not in my way at all of this project. And it's just so nice to look over and see all that substantial solid wood blocking with a nice big footprint on the hitch. Hitch made a nice place to lift right there. So, and we're off the ground by a couple of inches, which is good. Probably just have to add a couple inches to that LVL when we come to lift it up enough to put the wheels and tires on once we've lifted this. So, like I say, let's pop the wheels and tires off and consult the directions. Okay, well, rear installation starts one sheet before the diagrams and warnings. So, they want a floor jack under the rear axle and raise the vehicle with jack stands. Remove the axle U-bolts and lower the axle down a few inches, but then the U-bolts are removed, the axle can move freely. So, since we lifted with the bumper, or the hitch, I'm going to let that jack out, scoot that piece of wood, and get everything underneath the differential up snug, and then I'll drop these U-bolts off. I also want the eye bolts out of the springs if you're replacing springs. Most of this is block installation, F-150 Bronco, new spring installation. Remove the spring eye bolts, remove the OEM springs, new springs long end of the spring toward the rear bumper. And that's F-150 and Bronco, which doesn't apply to me. And then I guess they meant to say put everything all back together again. Rear carrier bearing, if a drive shaft vibration is present, the carrier bearing or cross member must be lowered. Double check the nuts and bolts are tight. So here's your torque specs. Cycle steering, inspect it. Suspension, brake lines, make sure they're not rubbing. And then had the headlights adjusted, have an alignment done. And then after the first 100 miles, retorque based on this chart. So I guess at this point, I'm just going to take that jack, move it up. And at least on the one side, take down the springs and U-bolts. And see if I can't get the new springs and U-bolts in there. U-bolts must be longer since the spring pack is probably a little thicker. I don't know. We'll see. I'm in good shape under here, generally speaking, in terms of very light surface rust. Hopefully that's your situation. If it isn't, and you got worse rust than that, here's my old behind the axle muffler outlet, which at this point, they pointed it right at the bushing for my anti-sway bar. Which I don't love that. Or my sway bar, anti-roll bar. I just had that done, but I just had a stainless steel exhaust built. So the downpipe is stainless on these models, and then the rest of it goes to hell over and over and over again. So I went to the local place, and they made me $1,100 stainless muffler in 45 minutes, which was lovely. Oh, we got to drop the shocks out of there, too. So just a bunch of disassembly. Let's get cracking. Well, I had to wait for my batteries to charge, annoyingly, but those U-bolt nuts are 24 millimeter. All right, yeah. I give everything a healthy amount of penetrating oil. Now, the other thing, though, is that I had hoped to just take the spring out of the shackle, but because of the way that the bolt is sent in from the far side, you'll actually have to take the shackle, or at least I do, have to take the shackle out of the shackle perch or whatever it's called here. For a second, I was thinking I might have to take that right off the frame, but I believe I can undo the shackle here, take it down right on the springs, transfer it to the new springs, and then set the new ones back up in there and bolt them up. So see if we can make that happen here. The shock is an 18 millimeter, which I just use a ratchet and a wrench to take the bolt nut out of the bottom. At the top, it's just a nut. There's a stud welded on to the frame, but the rubber bushing in the end of the shock is like kind of sticking on that stud on both sides. So you saw I juiced it up pretty well. A little later, once I have maybe the spring and stuff out of my way and can work in there a little handy more easily, I will use a pry bar to probably rip that off the stud, and then I'll probably throw those shocks in, I'm thinking now, before I even come back with this new spring and work from the inside out or inboard outboard. So all right, well, this shroud is covering that shiny ram, same as this rubber boot. And so this is, in my opinion, apples to apples. Since that was up, we'll put this end up in the back of the truck. However, the steel sleeve in the bushing that you just watched me press in with the bench vise is still stuck up on the threaded rod underneath the truck here, annoyingly. I have no headlamp. I have a light. Oh, I guess there is a light under there. Let me put my gloves on. So I was under here, and I just have this pickle fork for popping apart like tie rod ends and steering all these ball joints and stuff. You can use like a pickle fork. And so up there, where I don't have enough hands even remotely, that steel shaft is still on there. Let me see if I can get you in there. I'm not sure what it's going to take to get him off of there, but there's like, I'm not sure if that's part of it, that bigger size thing there. So I'm gonna, I guess, set you up and wail on that for however long. Fun. Well, that must be how it's supposed to be now that I've checked both So I suppose I better wrestle that steel out of that one bushing and then come back and install over top of that. We'll see. Well, so I thought you'd put the bushing on that stud and then smack the eye of the shock over it, but no. Put the bushing back, rubber bushing back in the shock, slip it up onto the stud, and then just beat it with a soft hammer until it slips up on. I lubed it up real good with WD-40, got the nut started. Now you can pull it down and get attached to the axle, but I don't want anything pulling my axle up. If anything, I'm probably gonna have to drop it down some from where it's been sitting to get the new spring pack in. So I'm gonna copy my work on the other side so that we're just waiting on the lower strut bolts, and then we'll go and get the spring packs in there and the shackles bolted up loosely and see what we need to do after that. Whew, that sucks. Okay. That wasn't terrible. You just got to get it in the right position. You're going to want, the shackle sitting up in the shackle perch over here. I went up and down with the floor jack. The other end of the axle was sitting on that jack stand over there, so I took that away, and now it's fully, I believe, well, it's on the jack, but the jack went to the bottom because you need to make more room here. So I just went all the way down with the jack. It's still under there in case I needed to come back up, but that was about where I needed to be as far as me. And then it was just a matter of, because this whole the whole axle is, my foot's stuck. The whole axle is loose, or it was more flexible before. So, which is a good point, because now on the other side I may have a harder time. But it's just a matter of sitting on the floor and leaning forward or back to manipulate the hub, tip it around, and I was leading the hole with a punch, but of course you got to get the punch out of the way and get the bolt through. And anyway, I got the both ends of the leaf spring bolted up. But then you go and you get this plate, and you try to put him on there the way that he was on the old springs. And, well, I'll show you. On the old springs, there's a little nut sitting here, and it sits around that real nice. However, on the new springs, this is some typical aftermarket part oversight shit. I've got no fucking light. But that's too large. She don't fit. So I'm gonna have to open that hole up, probably use a step bit and get that much done. Then we can put the new U-bolts. When I find them, I'll put those in, and then maybe I'll try to show the whole process on the other side now that we're at the end of this, when I feel better about it, knowing what I'm trying to accomplish and not wasting a bunch of time-lapse time where nothing's going on. I'll tell you what, doing a video series of this process has been super irritating, but I really hope that it does help somebody, even if it's a companion while you're working, going step by step. I'm going to summarize the kind of time that I've gotten this and everything when I'm all done. But now that I've buttoned up the far side to some extent, not completely torqued up and everything, but I will say I ended up using my own U-bolts again. The Skyjacker bolts are a fine thread. U-bolts are commonly a fine thread, or at least in my experience, from what I understand. They splay a little bit on their way around the axle because, of course, they don't match the old, I don't know, the parallax of the lens. But anyway, they're a little smaller, so they end up spreading out at the top. They're longer, but the thread's wrong, and they don't give you new bolt, or they don't give you new nuts. And the nice factory flange nuts and stuff that I have, I mean, look at that thing. My truck's in good condition, so anyway, I just reused my U-bolts over here, and I'll do it on this other side also. Otherwise, it's playing games. Going to the hardware store tomorrow. Where's the... So they're coming all the way through the nut, which is good enough for me. You know, I don't know, DOT, he may want to see 17 inches of extra U-bolt after the nut, but just lay on the floor then. I'll see if I give a shit. Now, over here, so since that far side is kind of buckled together, I had to drag this axle back with a ratchet strap. Then I can get real close to where I'm trying to be here with the shackle, and once I've got that, I can get the other hole lined up and pinned down. Then I'll throw that plate over, put the U-bolts and nuts back through there. I'll make sure the nuts are on and put the shock down onto the axle. And then I'm going to lift this thing and put the rear wheels and tires on it and roll out of the shop and park it out front where I can look at it while I drink and smoke weed tonight and enjoy the product of all my hard work here, because of course this isn't a mechanical service. This is something I wanted because I wanted a little bit more wheel gap. The ladies and a lot of people aren't going to understand. I just wanted more wheel gap. I just wanted the truck to look a little bit more aggressive. And again, OEM 4x4 ride height is up where we're going to be now. So let's get that fire and roll out for this evening, and then tomorrow and the following couple days I'm going to finalize stuff, get in alignment. I'll talk about how many hours and stuff I spent doing this. And anyway, back. There you go. Now, there's just one issue here, and that is that while I've got this forward spring hole lined up with the punch, the bolt that came out of there, I had to beat the end of it. That one really gave me trouble coming out for some reason, and I don't know why. They put this battery on the charger. And so I wailed on the tip of it with a brass hammer, and I have a big brass block here somewhere. Let's set this here. But like that, I have a brass hammer, which doesn't have really a lot of cojones because it's a little fella, which you often don't need a big one. And I have a block of brass that I inherited from the farm where I grew up, and I put that there and then beat that with an even more significant steel hammer. Couldn't get it to go, so by the time I beat the end of it, I was real easy on. I have a sense of, you know, how far you can push it, but you got a little bit of a munged up thread there. Now this matches the U-bolts, the OE U-bolts. The nuts that go on the OEM U-bolts is the same nut that goes on there, but as you can see, we got ourselves a little bit of a strip situation. This is where you want to quit. I filed on it a little bit with a triangular file to kind of open the tight spots up, and I ran it down with a wrench. You watch me there in the vise. However, I don't know what I can't figure out here, because this measures up at, well, I'll do it. This measures up at, where's that mic? This is 0.623.5 or 625, which is 5/8. So it's coarse because the U-bolts that this is not a U-bolt. However, like I said, it matches the thread of the U-bolts, and the U-bolts that came from Skyjacker are, like I said, commonly U-bolts are a fine thread, and the thread is finer than this. Okay, and they don't fit. If you can see, there you go. I don't know. So anyway, I figure it's 5/8 coarse, which is 11. If you look at the chart, where is it? Right, I guess that's just a decimal equivalent chart. It's the threads. No, it's on the other side or something. Anyway, there's only really coarse and fine. So I get out ye old, where is it? Did I put it away all the way in the drawer? I get out the thread gauge. Here it is. And I dig out, and this is stuff you want to have around for just such an occasion, unless it leads you astray. Like maybe I've had too long of a day here, but if I go to 11, 10, 11. Okay. Focus, baby. Anyway, that's 11. She don't fit. It's not. Need a bet. If you've never done this before, you really kind of want to look at this against a nice white background, but it's not fitting. Okay. But if you go to 13, because I just started playing around here just to see, 10, come on, come out of there. If you go to, these are threads per inch, okay? So if you go to 13 threads per inch, oh, she sits in there real nice. See that? She fits right in there. There's no such thing as 5/8 13. Is it metric? This truck is, you know, all kinds of SAE and metric back and forth, but it measures out practically exactly 5/8 of an inch in diameter. So here we are. If this boat could go in, then nothing would be torqued and ready to go down the highway, but I could lift it, throw the wheels and tires on, and park it out front and enjoy it like I said. And because I said that, we can't. I was going to just, in fact, the threads were just monkeyed up. I was going to get my buddy's tap and die and run his tap over the bolt and run the tap into the nut to clean up the threads and run the die over the bolt to clean up the threads, and I'd be back up and running. But no, sir, can't do this. Story of my life. So I'll get back to you when I figure out what my problem understanding this issue is, because I've looked it up on Rock Auto. I guess I looked up the spring perch bolt. Let me look up the U-bolt. We'll see. Well, I'll tell you what happened with that bolt in a second. I'm just getting down to, obviously I got that situation handled, and I'm getting down to the castle nuts for the steering. So we got let's see if I can keep from shaking you all over the place here. We got the new pitman arm coming down. That goes into the ball joint with a stud on it that I cut off from the other scenario, the other pitman arm. So I had to replace the whole drag link, which goes over there. And there's the tie rod link here that comes with a ball joint and a stud. That gets a castle nut. And then you get your adjusting sleeves, which are different, one on either side of the truck, different diameters and thread. And you got a ball joint that's threaded into those on the driver's side and a ball joint that's threaded on the passenger side. And that has a stud that goes up through the ear or the yoke part of the knuckle. and that gets a castle nut as well. So I'm down to those 2 outer castle nuts. And they have crenellated tops. That's why they're called a castle nut. And you're squeezing this ball joint down here within this boot. You're squeezing the boot down. And then you're going to pump grease in the Zerk fittings that are on the back of these bad boys. Can you see it there? If I can get my light to hit it just right. There it is. Okay. And fill them up with grease. If you fill it up first and try to run this bolt down and squeeze, you'll be, squeezing a lot of pressure into it, etc. So I elected not to do that. I'll fill them last. I just went down a little over flush, at least flush, if not a little farther with the castle nut. We're not trying to draw this together dead tight. We're just trying to line one of these notches in the castle top up with the hole that the cotter pin goes through, and we want to see that that pin can make it through there. If it's swimming on way high, well, then you ran the nut way too far down, right? And we want to set the pin down at the bottom of the crenellation, so we just want to go until we've cleared the hole, feed the pin through, and then you bend the ends out, which keeps that nut from backing off because it doesn't have a lot of torque on it, right? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to find the hole, line it up, and pin this outer and that other outer one. And then I'm going to get an alignment because I've already driven this a little bit around the block just to see. And my wheel's crooked, and obviously I'm wildly out of alignment. But these little adjuster shackles that pinch, this sleeve is threaded, but it has a slice in it. And when you're done committing to the overall length adjustment, you cinch these guys up. So for now, until I get my alignment, I'm going to find wherever there's some of them. Sometimes they clock and lock, whatever. I'm going to try not to point them up so they're not just a pocket of salty sand sitting there getting super rusty. I just as soon have them hang down, and any gravity liquids can be, rinsing and all that can fall down and away from the thread. So I'll probably run them up like that. And then, like I say, I'll pump some all-purpose grease into these ball joints and through these Zerk fittings. And then what happened with that shackle bolt at the back? Well, for some reason, this truck, like I said, the U-bolt nuts matched or would thread up onto that shackle bolt back there. Let's see if I can get you. That upper bolt, there he is, up there. What was I going to say? Or how did I get that in there? Oh, that has to be bolted. The shackle comes down. So that actually got bolted up on the bench, no problem. Then the shackle comes down on the spring, comes off with it, gets moved over to the new spring, and then you put this up. So this is the bolt that you're looking to install, the lower bolt, when you're putting this assembly back in there. And because I had to beat the far side, the rest of this truck came apart, no problem. But if you have problems taking these bolts out, when you're beating the end of them to get the bolt out of there initially, you mung the end of it all up, the starting threads on it, yada, yada. And so I was lucky enough to establish that it, in fact, along with my U-bolts, are an M16 by 2 pitch, which is how metric threads are called out, not a 5/8 by 11 thread, because as I probably showed you, the thread grade, the 11 threads per inch, which is how SAE threads are noted, didn't fit into the grooves. 13 threads per inch, almost, visually is practically perfect. And the micrometer reading of 0.622 or whatever it was showing was almost 625, which is 5/8, but it's far closer to 16 millimeter. Or that it actually was 16 millimeter, but you can confuse the two by just measuring them if you're not careful. For some reason, I didn't see anybody else's truck on forums, or anybody's always talking about SAE U-bolts and shackle bolts, but I have metric M16 by 2. I got a thread, my buddy's kit actually. What it is, it's a file that does 3 or 4 threads at a time, and the pitch is correct. So you just lay the bolt out on the vise, and you just file around the end of it, and just keep filing on it and wire brush and filing it all back into, taking any positive material off that's in the way of that appropriate thread geometry. And then you get everything all cleaned up, you lube it in and out, you make sure it's running in and out of the bolt real good, and you get everything lined up there with a punch and stuff working from the far side so you can get the bolt started. And you can use ratchet straps to pull and levers, but you want to manipulate this whole assembly around until you can send that bolt in, which I came home and did. It took me about half an hour start to finish to get everything lining up and put it together and button it down. So with these tie rod end castle nuts pinned, I'm good to drive around a day or two until I get my alignment done. I am going to grease those all those joints too. I don't want to drive around without greasing those. But overall, that's going to wrap up this lift. I mean, it's been years now, 3 years since I bought this truck. I've poured tons of money into it. For the money it's made me and the capability that it has, it's still less than half the cost of a new truck with that capability. Probably closer to a third the cost of a new truck with this capability. And I'm getting closer to it looking good enough for my purposes. I like the old, slightly beat up, but clean, rust-free truck look. And we're getting there. I haven't got a great angle on it here sitting in the doorway. I've got new artwork and stuff to put on the side. And we're doing a whole facelift scenario. But that four-wheel drive ride height, guys, that's I just always wanted. This truck came from so close. It was so clean. It was so cost-effective when I bought it. It was everything I wanted, but I might have liked the extended cab, and I might have liked four-wheel drive just for the ride height. I've never even been stuck in it. But just that ride height, it was well worth it to me. This constitutes a suspension upgrade, you know, brand new springs, brand new shocks. It was sitting on basically the OEM stuff that's 30 years old now. And so it was due. The steering, the last time I got in alignment, my buddy did it for me and he said, you know, I'm not trying to do that again. That's pretty rusted up and old and shitty. So I don't mind having replaced that. We got the chrome center caps finally coming for these Alcoa wheels that I powder coated a while ago, because with all the dressy kind of silver and stuff, I got a diamond plate thing I'm going to put across the top of the tailgate. We're kind of missing, it kind of starts to run down the lower half of the truck without anything going on with the wheels. We're going to try the straight up chrome caps. If I don't like them, I can always give them a satin clear coat in a 2K clear, which would knock it down to more like this aluminum finish, which may be better than that mirror chrome. So we'll see. Anyway, this is how you do a 3-inch Skyjacker lift to a 2-wheel drive 95 F250, along with some steering upgrades, and you do it all yourself on the ground, which I got to tell you guys, it's a real bummer. It's not the end of the world if you're indoors and stuff and you don't mind it, but I can see so many places here where you're propping yourself up with your own elbow rather than having 2 arms and hands free to do the work when you would, as you would on a lift. I really see the value in that, having a lift to work on. But holy smokes, I got a hard 30 hours in this, if not 40, with all the procurement and the running around and getting set up with, you know, it's easily, man, I just can't see myself if I had never had to run out. I had every single tool and I didn't run into anything that slowed me down. Working 8 hours a day for 5 days on this, I suppose I could have done it, but that isn't going to be the case. You know, it's a long process, and I have a fairly clean truck. So I would be, if I were you doing it on the weekends, I'd make a commitment to having it on the lift for at least 2 weeks, if not 3 or 4, depending on if you can get some help. That's a good idea. Several places here I got stuck needing some help, or would have gone so much more quickly if I had some help. So anyway, folks, hopefully that's helping somebody tackle this project on their own. And if you have questions or anything about this specific arrangement, I can probably answer them. Leave them in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see ya. All right. Well, we're up and rolling. I sprung for those chrome center caps finally that never came on these wheels that I got, that were all ruined, and I had sandblasted and powder coated. I juiced up my lugs with some rust stop juice before I snap those on. Then I'll get a touchless wash, which should even this out and clean that up a little bit on the outside, hopefully. But I'm really loath to take this parking brake all down and off again and monkey around trying to get those 2 holes drilled. Boop, boop. So, because other than that, we're kind of done here. I got to grease my new steering, but I sprung for the Milwaukee grease gun finally, by the way, and I got some red and tacky Lucas grease. But this is just going to be nice because you can truly run the grease gun with one hand, where normally you have to hold the body of it and kind of pump against the body of it. If you've got to hold the tip onto a Zerk fitting, which is real annoying. There's the old style over here. And mine had a hand pump, but just still, when it's cold out and stuff, you run into a situation where it's just kind of unhandy. Now I can have a different type of grease in here, and that'll kick around. It's a carryover thing from where I grew up, but this is the new hotness. So I'll get the steering greased as well. But let's see if we can't get this nice long 7/16 bit that I snagged at Ace Hardware into the right angle drill, and get, now that the wheel's turned out of the way, get up in there and drill enough of a hole to get the bolt through, even if it's at a slight angle. The hole axis in the bracket is normal to the face of the bracket. It'll just be the hole that we drill through the frame that will be at a slight angle. But ultimately the frame is, I think, thin enough that when we sandwich everything, it'll pull in tightly, and it'll certainly be better than not having the bolt there at all. But let's see if we can get that done without taking the wheel off, and that's certainly without taking that brake down. Let's. Well, that worked like a charm. Saved me taking that parking brake down. Ended up being real nice. So let's get those steering connections greased, where we installed the Zerk fittings with the new grease gun. And then we can sort of call this project completed. There you have it. It's what I always wanted. This truck was for sale so close and in such clean, nice shape for this area. Beat up all over the place, which is perfect for a work truck. I'm not in a big hurry to beat it up further, but it doesn't make me sick when if I should bump or bang it. Got some dents to pull out. Just got to go back for rust stop underneath every year, like I've been trying to do every year for it, to keep it juiced up, these areas of the bumper. Eventually I'll get myself a nice clean bumper for the rear. I'll get myself a bumper for the front that isn't twisted on this corner, you know. But for now, 3/4 ton F250 in pretty nice shape. I've been through almost everything here. We got a little bit of a chirping belt for the power steering pump, I want to say. Pump itself may need to be replaced, I guess. It's all juicy in that area underneath, might be leaking. But overall, I got the West Coast mirrors, toolboxes, and ladder rack on there. And now I've got that wheel gap that I wanted. Just a little more wheel gap, more of a four-wheel drive looking setup. I don't absolutely need four-wheel drive. I've gotten along just fine without it for several years now. I try not to go out in the worst weather. I'm not working every single day if I can help it, so the look is just fine with me. But that was a project. Probably 6 weeks start to finish of chipping away. Hopefully anybody watching this series, if anybody watches the series here and there even, you run into a few pitfalls and find where I managed to work through it. Stay moving, keep you moving. Unlike me, I had to stop and scratch my head and figure things out. But overall, you need that front and rear brake kit just for the T that comes in the one, because the master cylinder goes to a T here and then to the driver and passenger side. You don't need to brake extend, or you don't need the brake extensions on the rear, because they come across from on the axle like that. They don't drop down and need to be any longer from the frame. So I called Skyjacker right up and told them my exact project, and to their credit, they set me up with everything that I was going to need. I didn't end up needing anything else. I did not need their U-bolts, which came probably SAE thread, Imperial, but my U-bolts and nuts were reused on this because they are M16 by 2. Not sure if you can see them in there. Same as my shackle bolts. Everything was M16 2 metric. Very similar to 5/8 11 But if you get out the thread gauge, it'll only fit on 13 threads per inch, which is not a real thread. So that's an M16 by 2 thread pitch metric. And that, I didn't see anybody else with a truck like that, although it looked OEM, or at least it's been on this truck for a very long time and it was all the same, so it must have been factory at some point here. There's your 1995 F250 two-wheel drive, 7.5 liter 460, 3-inch lift to 4x4 height. Now all I need is an alignment. Or hopefully that's all I need is the alignment. I'm done spending on this rig for a while. We got the artwork already, that's gonna change, so I'm not spending technically there, I've already paid for it. But we got a runner here, make some money for 6 months before we go in on another big project. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Check out my channel for other cool stuff. We'll see ya.